My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Brazier with me, Nana Queer. Fast-paced news from 4 until 6. And in the next hour, today we saw the candidates for the leadership of the Conservative Party whittled down even further. There's now just 5 remaining in the race after Suella Braverman was knocked out with the fewest supporters. We'll have the latest reaction to the vote and we'll speak to the political polling guru, Lord Hayward. And there's still it seems Nicola Sturgeon, she just can't take no for an answer. The Scottish First Minister today set out her vision for an independent Scotland with plans to hold a referendum on the matter as early as next year. We'll debate whether a Scottish succession is a really good idea. And of course, with me for the next 2 hours, UKIP leader Neil Hamilton. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. And the top stories on GB News. As you've just been hearing, the Attorney General, Suella Braverman, has been knocked out of the race to replace Prime Minister Boris Johnson. There are now 5 lawmakers left battling to lead the Tories and a country hoping to move on from months of scandal. The second round of ballots has kept the ex-Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, as the front-runner, and Trade Minister Penny Mordaunt came in second place. Sir Graham Brady, chairman of the Conservative Party's 1922 committee, says further rounds of voting will continue next week until 2 candidates remain.
As follows: Badenoch 49, Braverman 27, Mordaunt 83, Sunak 101, Truss 64, Tugendhat 32. Therefore, under the rules, Suella Braverman is eliminated from the contest and the others are able to go forward to a further ballot on Monday.
Well, in other news today, Scotland's First Minister says the UK is facing a shift to the right, whoever becomes the next Prime Minister. Nicola Sturgeon was speaking as she launched a second paper aimed at making a fresh case for Scotland to leave the United Kingdom. She says independence is now essential.
None of them seem to have anything to offer Scotland except democracy denial. So I don't see any of them offering anything positive for Scotland at all, and that's the problem. Scotland is facing yet another Prime Minister, the fourth in my time as First Minister, that we haven't voted for, would not vote for, and that will impose policies that we don't support.
In international news, Sri Lanka's President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has emailed a letter of resignation to the Speaker of the country's parliament, a source has told Reuters news agency. That's after he landed in Singapore earlier, fleeing protests against his premiership. The unrest in Sri Lanka is over his country's economic meltdown. Singapore's foreign ministry says he's entered the country on a private visit and hasn't yet sought asylum. Russian airstrikes have killed at least 20 people, including a baby in central Ukraine. President Zelensky says a medical centre and residential buildings were hit in downtown Vinnytsia. At least 90 people are reportedly injured. President Zelensky's called the attack yet another act of Russian terrorism. Here, train drivers at 8 rail companies will now go on strike on the 30th of July in a dispute over pay. That's in addition to a strike by RMT members on the 27th of this month. The train drivers' union, ASLEF, is demanding a pay rise in line with inflation. The Department for Transport says drivers already earn significantly more than the average salary in the UK. 3 men accused of leading an organised crime group have been charged with people smuggling offences. They were among 4 people arrested by the National Crime Agency in East London and Essex on Tuesday. They're accused of attempting to smuggle people into the UK in the back of lorries. Low-income households will start receiving £326 from today. That's the first of 2 payments to ease the cost of living crisis. A second instalment of £324 will be transferred in the autumn. It's part of the government's £37 billion support package. Alan Driver, who's already received the payment, told GB News even the essentials are too expensive.
Everybody's had to go buy cheaper products, not name brands, and it's just detrimental. You know, people need a little something, make them feel good every now and then in life, you know, whether that be a haircut, whether that be getting your nails done, or whether that be a bit of ice cream, you know when that sound comes outside your door and that ice cream, and you can't buy the ice cream. That's sad. That's sad.
In Turkey, more than 3,500 people have been evacuated after wildfires spread to residential areas. They've also hit other parts of Europe, including France and Portugal, where there's a second heatwave. Meanwhile, back here, a Cobra emergency committee has been called to discuss the measures in place to deal with the extreme temperatures expected over the coming weekend. That's it. You're up to date on GB News. More news as it happens. Right now, it's back to Nana Akua, who's hosting Brazier.
Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. This is Brazier. Now, Suella Braverman has been eliminated from Conservative leadership contest after she received just 27 votes from Tory MPs. That is 5 less than she got yesterday. Now, Rishi Sunak and Penny Mordaunt are at the top of that leaderboard for support from MPs with 101 and 83 votes, respectively. Then you've got Liz Truss, she's got 64, while Kemi Badenoch has 49, and Tom Tugendhat at the bottom there with 32. So joining me now is GB News political editor Darren McCaffrey. Darren, now were you surprised that Suella, she's been eliminated today?
She has. When we were looking at the figures yesterday, it did seem likely that that was going to happen, Nana. The big question, as always, is when the kind of candidates have been essentially knocked out in the kind of weakest link or X Factor style, if you like. It's about where their votes will go next, and that's clearly where lots of MPs' focus will be in the days to come. Just where precisely will Suella Braverman's votes go now? You would have thought, by convention, given the fact that she's run on the right of the party, that lots of those votes may well go to someone like Liz Truss, but that is not guaranteed in all of this. Looking at the overall picture, clearly Rishi Sunak will be pretty pleased that he's managed to get into triple figures. He remains, without a shadow of a doubt, the most popular amongst MPs at this stage. But there is also this sense, and you speak to a lot of MPs, as I've been doing in Parliament today, where there is a momentum behind Penny Mordaunt. She did pick up the most number of MPs in terms of the increase, up 16. Liz Truss was up 14, Rishi Sunak up 13. So there is a sense, at least, that the momentum is behind her. And momentum is clearly very, very, very important in politics. In saying that, we're not now going to have another round of votes here in Parliament until Monday, so that's got a weekend still to go. What's going to happen this weekend? Well, we're potentially going to see some TV debates between the remaining 5 candidates. That could prove pretty crucial, not just for MPs, but also in trying to change public opinion amongst Conservative members, and that does weigh heavily on how MPs in the end decide to vote. And additionally, really interestingly in all of this, we're going to have lots of articles and kind of investigations and stories in the newspapers over the weekend, and that has done a few candidates in the past a bit of a cropper, in the sense that there may be skeletons in people's cupboards that we're not entirely aware of. So it'll be interesting to see the press coverage this weekend, again, which could have a big impact on this campaign.
Now, Rishi Sunak does look as though, at the moment, he appears to be the front runner. There is a lot of momentum picking up around Penny Mordaunt. What is the general consensus? Do you think that she's going to run away with this particular one, because she's picking up more and more as she goes?
That is entirely possible. And as I say, momentum really matters in politics. And if someone thinks someone's going to do very well, if they think they potentially might going to win, lots of people will then start to switch to that campaign. At the end of the day, politicians also want to end up in government. Some of them want to get some pretty decent jobs. And if they think that someone like Penny Mordaunt is going to win, they will start to coalesce around that campaign. It's one of the reasons Rishi Sunak's doing well, let's be honest about this at the moment, because lots of people agree what he's got to say, but a lot of people also think he is going to be Prime Minister, and patronage in politics is a very, very powerful force. But at the same time, this is also a bit of a brutal and nasty campaign, as you would expect. And we saw a little bit of that today, given the momentum behind Penny Mordaunt, with Lord Frost, the former Brexit secretary, kind of laying into Penny Mordaunt, questioning her abilities, questioning her skills in that department when he was in charge. Now, Liz Truss, who was asked about this a little earlier on today, tried to distance herself from that and said she's not going to indulge in attacking other candidates. But be in no doubt, behind the scenes, MPs and campaigns are briefing against other MPs and campaigns to try and ensure that their man or woman wins this race. So it is going to be absolutely fascinating. I suspect it'll get a bit more vicious this weekend. But in the end, this is still a very, very open race, and one that is not going to end on Monday, but may well carry through right until the last minute, until next Wednesday evening, when we should at least then get the final two. But that is not the race over. Let's not forget about that, because the final two then go to the Conservative membership, who will spend this summer deciding which one they want to lead the Conservative Party and which one they effectively also, of course, want to become Prime Minister of this country.
Well, Darren, I mean, thank you so much for that. They've got the weekend to mull it over, so I wonder what they'll come up with. Darren McCaffrey, thank you so much. He's our GB News political editor. Right, so let's see what UKIP leader Neil Hamilton makes of that. He's joining me today as my press guest. Right, so Neil, what do you think? We are in this situation because they thought, I personally don't think the Conservative Party read the room correctly. But what do you make of all of this?
Well, I think it's been a very good contest so far, and I think one of the best things about it is that it's brought forward Kemi Badenoch and Suella Braverman, whom very few people had previously heard of. And I think they've actually had the best leadership campaigns. Suella started it off. She was the first one out of the traps. And I've read quite a lot of what Kemi Badenoch has been saying. And it seems to me that she is a really first-class candidate. Actually, she did better in this second round, proportionately, than any of the other candidates. She had 40 votes first time round, got 49 the second time. That's nearly a 25% increase in her vote. Nobody else got anything like that. And my guess is that she'll get the bulk of Suella Braverman's redistributed votes in the next round. So I think that she's laying claim to a really important job in the cabinet of whoever wins this contest. And I think Suella also has a good chance of getting it. So I think it's a very healthy process. People are complaining about the nastiness of the contest, but Boris said the whole thing is Darwinian. Actually, it's Hobbesian. Thomas Hobbes, philosopher from my hometown of Malmesbury, who said, life is nasty, brutish and short. Well, this is a nasty, brutish and short process, but people have to be able to defend themselves and explain themselves and appeal successfully to the electorate, because life in politics is just like that. You can't have a contest like this with the gloves on and everybody cocooned in cotton wool.
Well, very briefly as well, because I want to bring in a top polling expert. But I want to ask you, what about all the comments with regard to Penny Mordaunt, where she was talking about a trans woman is a woman and a trans man is a man?
Well, I think that's worrying because this is one of the big issues. I think the cancel culture, as we know on GB News, is one of the most important issues of the day. She's tried to explain away what she said previously, but she wrote a book which was heavily praised by Richard Branson, Tony Blair, and other suspects
All the best
of
ones,
that
then.
kind. So I really do think that, for those who are on the right of the party and those who are on the libertarian wing of the Conservative Party, Penny Mordaunt has, I think, to do a bit more explaining about what her real position is on these issues.
Well, it'll be interesting because the competition is obviously hotting up. Right, well, let's... joining me now, then, is Conservative MP for the Forest of Dean and former Chief Whip Mark Harper. Now, Mark, I hear you're supporting Rishi Sunak in this particular campaign. Rishi currently has obviously got the most votes from the MPs at the moment. But every other poll, when they've done it, when it's been taken to the members, suggests that Penny Mordaunt would beat all of them in the final vote. What do you make of that?
Well, look, one thing I've learned in politics is you don't just look at one opinion poll. So there was another recent opinion poll of Conservative members that actually had Rishi Sunak beating both Liz Truss and Penny Mordaunt. So actually, I think you've got to look at a range of polls. At the moment, we're competing amongst members of Parliament. Rishi remains in the lead. He picked up a bigger share of the number of votes that were available from the two candidates that knocked out than he had previously. So I'm very pleased with today's result, and we will keep making the case with colleagues for the next ballot, which is on Monday.
And of course, the gloves are off and all that. We know a lot about Rishi. Do you think his reputation has been tarnished, obviously, by the holding of the Green Card? Then, of course, his wife, who has a share in Emphasis, a company that he didn't declare in the minister's interests. And then Emphasis itself has actually been awarded around about £500 million worth of public sector contracts and all of that kind of thing. Do you think that this has tarnished his reputation?
Well, look, I just need to pick you up, I think, on that issue there about Emphasis. My understanding is when the issues came up with Rishi Sunak earlier this year, he referred himself to the then independent advisor on ministerial interest, Lord Geit, who looked at all of his interests, whether they'd been properly declared, and he concluded that Rishi Sunak had been scrupulous in declaring all of his interests and had behaved absolutely properly. So I don't think what you said there about his interests is actually accurate. He absolutely complied with all the rules to the letter and to the spirit.
Yeah, but as I read it, maybe it wasn't necessary for him to declare it, but it wasn't actually initially declared. Now, you previously said that Rishi Sunak would be a breath of fresh air. But is that really the case, considering that he's been really pretty much the second most powerful person next to Boris Johnson? And you could say that he was part of the reason, if you look at the way, I mean, he was the architect of that disastrous spring statement. We can't forget that. 5% off solar panels and the heat pumps for the richest of people. Most people can't afford that. Then there was the loan to you and I, but then the money was going to be given to the the energy companies. This was out of touch. Do you think that perhaps, you know, he's not as in touch because you've actually said he's a breath of fresh air? A lot of the others would say, well, hang on a minute.
Well, yeah, I pick up 2 points from that question. First of all, on the breath of fresh air, I was referring to the fact that he's going to restore trust to how government's conducted. We all know why we're here, which is that there were issues with the way the Prime Minister conducted things, and I think the way Rishi conducts things, he's an honest man, he's got integrity, and he's been clear in this campaign so far. He's going to be honest with the British public about the challenges we face. I think that will be a breath of fresh air, actually. On your issue about being in touch, I think if you look at what he's done, what he did during the pandemic in terms of rolling out the furlough scheme, which saved millions of jobs, thousands of businesses, and also recently, if you take what he did in February, the spring statement, and the further package of help he's rolled out, he's absolutely focused on helping people across the country with the challenges from energy prices and from the other things that are raising prices and challenging people's cost of living. And I think you judge people not just by what they say, but what they do. And I think on that measure, Rishi Sunak's the right man to lead the country in the years to come.
OK. Well, and also, just on a note about his connection with people, I mean, in his campaign video, he said he doesn't know any sort of working class people type thing, which probably sticks in the craw of a lot of people. Do you think that he has the ability to hold the red wall?
Yes, I think he does, and there's a number of my colleagues from those so-called red wall seats from the northeast of England who are backing him and are very clear about why they're backing him, because he's delivered. My colleague Jacob Young from Redcar, he's been very clear that Rishi delivered for his part of the world, and I think he's got support from Conservative colleagues from Leave areas, from Remain areas, from all parts of the United Kingdom, and I think he's got a very wide appeal, which I think is important for MPs to think about, but also for winning that general election when it comes in a couple of years' time.
Mark, thank you so much for talking to me. That's Mark Harper. He's a Conservative MP.
Pleasure. Thanks very much.
Of Dean. Thank you so much. Right, so joining me now is Lord Hayward, the Conservative peer and polling analyst. Thank you for joining me. Do you think that the former Chancellor Rishi Sunak has as good as secured his place in the final two? I mean, he's on over 100 votes.
He's getting pretty close to it. I would expect him to do. I said a few days ago I thought it was going to be Rishi Sunak +1, and that's where it's looking as if it is. What's been interesting in the development of the campaign was, if you go back a few days, it was get Rishi. In other words, stop Rishi. The briefings were against him. You've raised some of the issues that people were raising previously. What we've now got is a get Penny campaign on exactly the same basis, because they thought they could stop Rishi. The question is now whether they can stop Penny. But it is striking how there has been this shift from one to the other person.
Do you think that with this shift that Penny Mordaunt will actually manage to clinch it?
There's no question. It's difficult to suggest precisely who will. It's clearly between her and Liz Truss. They both put on votes this time. Penny put on 16, Liz Truss put on 14. By my calculations, actually, it would appear that one Tory MP didn't vote this time. Now, I may have got the maths wrong in a haste, but it's just one of the oddities that, sadly, it's the sort of thing that I would notice. But I think it is between the two females.
Because it seems quite interesting that the MPs seem to be caught by surprise that the actual members would, if this poll, the YouGov poll is to be believed, would suggest that Penny Mordaunt would win hands down over every candidate. Whereas the member... Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, I think it is surprising, but I also would caution against looking at one specific poll in these circumstances. There's been a number of polls which have produced varying results. One of the difficulties you've got both for Kemi and to a lesser extent for Penny is that they are relatively unknown individuals. The longer this campaign goes on, the more people will actually feel that they know the individuals better. But one has to be careful about the vagaries of opinion polls and what one or two polls may show in one direction or another.
Yeah, I suspect it could work the other way. The more we get to know them, the more we might not actually like them. What about in terms?
You're being so cynical.
Well, I can't help it. You know, what have we got to pick from? Crikey. The Tory voters, though, from your polling, what does it say that they are sort of more interested in? So, is it immigration? Is it Brexit? Is it the cost of living? What is the focus? From your poll,
I think one of the striking things about the campaign so far in Parliament has been the lack of, or the lower level of factionalism in comparison with the last two leadership elections. Brexit is nowhere near the dominant issue that it was previously. Most of the candidates have been able to produce supporters from different wings of the party and different geographic locations. So I think there are going to be many surprises. Looking at the Conservative members, they are heavily weighted towards the area from the Wash to the Severn southwards. That's East Anglia, South West, London and the South East in general. They're older, but they're also very conscious of the issue of, are we going to win an election? And that's not just a general election. Many of them are local councillors. They lost seats in May this year. They will be judging the candidates not only on the position where they are in the party, but whether they believe that they have a campaigning ability which they can communicate to the population at large.
And presumably whether they're going to beat Sir Keir Starmer, although I think even I could beat him. Thank you so much, Lord Hayward. Good to talk to you. That's Lord Robert Hayward. He's the Conservative peer and he's a polling analyst. You're with me, I'm Nana Akwe. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, we will talk more about the Tory leadership contest, as this afternoon, Suella Braverman was eliminated from the race. Now, it leaves just 5 candidates in the running to replace Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. I'll speak to the associate editor of The Spectator, Rod Little, to find out what he thinks next. But we'll be back after this short break.
Tonight on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good afternoon. It is fast approaching 29 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akwe on Brazier. Right, now, I've got to say, we're now continuing with our coverage of the Conservative leadership contest. And earlier today, Suella Braverman was eliminated from the race after securing the lowest votes of the pack. Now, there's now a front-runner that is emerging. Trade Minister Penny Mordaunt, you may never have heard of that name before, and now suddenly is the most popular candidate among Conservative voters. And that is according to a recent YouGov poll. While she has so far secured less support amongst the Tory MPs themselves than Rishi Sunak, another poll did find that she would beat any of the candidates if put up against them in the final two. But there's been criticism of her stance on trans rights. Here's a clip of her speaking in Parliament in 2018.
But let me say, in proposing them from this dispatch box, that trans men are men, trans women are women, and great care has been taken in the drafting of and the accepting of these amendments to ensure that that message has been got across.
But when launching her campaign yesterday, the former Trade Minister seemed to strike a different tone.
Chris Hope, last question.
Very last one, a quick one and a straightforward one. How do you define a woman?
I'm a woman. I am biologically a woman. And I can tell you, Chris, that if you have been in the Royal Navy and you have competed physically against men, you understand the biological difference between men and women.
So were you satisfied with that answer? Joining me now is Associate Editor of The Spectator, Rod Little. Rod, thank you for joining me. Do you think Penny has actually hurt her chances of becoming the next Prime Minister with her previous statement on trans rights?
Well, I would hope so. She's not a Conservative, she's a Liberal. She shouldn't be in the running, she shouldn't be in the Conservative Party, she's a Liberal. But the Conservative Party has been led by Liberals many times in the past. It looks to me very much, I mean, she's a personable woman, she's a goodish speaker, not as good as Kemi Badenoch. She's got an intellect, no question about that. But I suspect that when this process is all over, none of the leaders of our three main parties will actually know what a woman is. They will not be able to define what a woman is. And it takes you back in a way to Brexit when, 4/5 of the House of Commons were against Brexit. We're back in the same position whereby there's a Liberal hegemony which simply doesn't have any support in the country. And I think in electing Penny, the Conservative Party is cheerfully throwing away its last chance to beat the ghastly prospect of a Starmer, Sturgeon, Drakeford coalition next time around.
It is actually quite interesting as well, because with regard to that, when she was sort of challenged about the first time when she made the comment with regard to the trans issue, she said that she had only a day to read the bill. That's what she said. But even as you listen as she was speaking there, she said that great care has been taken in the drafting of this. So she's saying two very, very different things. And actually, one MP told Sky News that anyone who's been a bill minister will tell you that you have plenty of time to prepare. So she's sort of saying two very different things, which I think is quite worrying. Do you think that the Conservatives have actually become more liberal in defining a woman?
Well, I don't think they're able to do so. I mean, Boris was able to do so when really, really pushed. And I think Rishi gave it a stab as well. But there is no one within that top tranche of the Conservative Party, perhaps Liz Truss aside, certainly Kemi Badenoch aside, who was prepared to push back against this absurd propaganda, which nobody in the country supports. That's the crucial thing about it. Nobody in the country goes along with this. There was an opinion poll 2 days ago which showed that 98%, I mean, you never get 98%. That's the kind of figures you get, in Soviet elections in 98% of people do not want lavatories regendered so that transgender people can use the lavatories for which they were biologically not suited. 98%. It was 97% about men and women having their own spaces. It was over 60%, and virtually no one in favour of transgender people competing against transgendered men competing against women in sport. There is no support for this rubbish. And yet the Conservative Party has continually got along with it, Nana. It just goes along with it. It's under the Conservative government that we had all those poor kids sent for gender realignment surgery at the Tavistock Clinic, more and more each year. It's under Conservatives that we've seen Stonewall telling children in schools, that they should be able to explore the notion of transgenderism, and that it's perfectly good and all hunky-dory and everything. It's an absurdity, and the country doesn't buy it. And I thought for a bit, Nana, that the Tories would look at Kemi Badenoch and think, how on earth can Keir Starmer fight against Kemi Badenoch? She is a living refutation of everything that the Labour Party and the Liberals stand for, in that she's a bright, clever, ambitious young woman who's worked in fast food outlets and who's fought her way to the top without ever screaming racist, without ever demanding an all-woman shortlist. She's got there, and so many others have done the same thing in the Conservative Party, but she would be a breath of fresh air, I think. And I think she could win an election.
Yeah, well, I think it's a slightly poor selection, sadly, but I think she's probably one of the best out of the bunch. Rod Little, thank you so much. He's the Associate Editor for The Spectator. You're with me, I'm Nana Akwe, on GB News, on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up this afternoon, the rail union ASLEF has today announced strike action will take place on the 30th of July over a pay dispute. We'll have the latest from the transport journalist and author Christian Warmer But first, let's bring you up to date with the latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. As you've been hearing, the Attorney-General, Suella Braverman, has been knocked out of the race to replace Prime Minister Boris Johnson. So there are now 5 lawmakers left battling to lead the Tories and a country hoping to move on from months of scandal. The second round of ballots has kept the ex-Chancellor Rishi Sunak as the front runner with 101 votes and the Trade Minister Penny Mordaunt coming second with 83 votes. Sir Graham Brady, chairman of the Conservative Party's 1922 committee, says further rounds of voting will continue until 2 candidates remain.
Suella Braverman is eliminated from the contest and the others are able to go forward to a further ballot on Monday.
Meanwhile, Scotland's First Minister says the UK is facing a shift to the right, whoever becomes the next Prime Minister. Nicola Sturgeon says independence is now essential as she launches a second paper aimed at making a fresh case for Scotland to leave the UK. Internationally, Sri Lanka's President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has emailed a letter of resignation to the Speaker of the country's parliament. He landed in Singapore earlier, fleeing yet more protests after he'd failed to resign as promised on Wednesday. The unrest in Sri Lanka is over his country's economic meltdown. Singapore's foreign ministry says he's entered the country on a private visit and hasn't sought asylum. Here, train drivers at 8 rail companies will go on strike on the 30th of July in a dispute over pay. That's in addition to a strike by RMT members on the 27th of July. The train drivers' union ASLEV is demanding a pay rise in line with inflation. Those are your latest news headlines. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+ with GB News. And we'll be back to Brazier in a bit.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well.
I feel like I could take on the world.
Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
If you've just joined me, welcome on board. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Okwere. This is Brazier, and it is time for the debate this hour. Now, Nicola Sturgeon today published a second paper which argues for Scottish independence. The Scottish First Minister wants to hold a second independence referendum, and she's always wanting to hold one. This one she's scheduling for October 2023. She said that she would be willing to compromise with the next Prime Minister to hold the vote. So I'm asking, should there be a second Scottish independence referendum? Right, I'm joined by my guest panellist, Neil Hamilton. Neil, what do you think? She's on about it. That's all she ever talks about.
Well, she's only on about it because she knows she's not going to get it. She'd be frightened to death if she thought there was a real prospect of a referendum on Scottish independence, because she knows she's bound to lose that one just as she lost the last one. So this is all a try-on. And half of me says, yes, let's bring it on. Let's see what happens. Let's have a referendum in England on Scottish independence and see what the result of that is. Actually, she might be better off having her referendum in England rather than in Scotland, because a lot of people in England would be glad to get rid of her.
I mean, when is it enough for her? Because if she does a second one, why would she hold one that she knows she's going to lose? I can't see the benefit.
Yeah, well, of course, she knows that she would lose it. That's why she's asking for it, as I say. You know, she can't tell you what Scottish currency would be after independence. She doesn't know what proportion of the UK national debt that Scotland would have to be loaded up with. And she can't tell you what the answer is to the single market of the United Kingdom. You know, they'd be rebuilding Hadrian's Wall. And so this is a nonsense project on her part. And I think, actually, we should take her at her word, call her bluff. Let's get rid of this issue for a real generation, which she said last time. This is once in a generation.
Yes.
Well, a generation now for her is 10 years or whatever. Well, it isn't, as we know, it's 25 years or more. So, yeah, I would say bring it on. Otherwise, we'll never hear the end of this for God knows how much longer.
So she's saying that, hoping that we'll say no, 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 to make her look more popular, and to sort of bring power towards her cause of wanting
Well, of course,
independence.
it distracts attention from Scotland's real problems, the disaster that the SNP has been for education, health, the public finances, transport, you name it. They've failed on every count. And so talking about this means we don't talk about the things that really matter to people in Scotland.
A bit like all of this leadership voting as well. No one's really talking about the cost of living. Right, well, I'm joined by the political writer James Melvin and Michelle Valentine, who is the former leader of Reform UK Scotland and a former MSP. Right, so I'm going to start then. What do you think? Do you think that, Michelle, I'm going to start with you then. Do you think that Scotland should be able to hold a second referendum without the permission of Westminster?
No, I don't think so, because that is fundamentally changing the rules by which we are abiding. But I think there's a really important factor here. The reason the SNP can keep calling for independence referendums and really pushing something that they probably know they'll lose, and that also on this occasion they don't even believe is going to happen because they know the timetable doesn't work. There is no space between now and October for the process to actually allow them to hold a referendum in October. But the point is, they can do it because there's no detriment to losing. I mean, we won the last one. As unionists, we won the last referendum to keep the UK together. And you'd have thought that would be it. We'd won it for a generation. But actually, no. It's now coming back again constantly as a conversation. If we have another one and the SNP lose again, they immediately start on the third referendum. There needs to be a consequence to the SNP losing these independence referendums. That, you know, as unionists, do we just keep going until they win and we lose, and then that's it, done? Because that's how it feels. And actually, we need something akin to a Clarity Act that says, if you lose, there has to be a period of however long until you can have another one, or that's it. You get one more go at it. And if you lose again, we enshrine the UK forever. And until we have something like that, as unionists, we are in a constant state of battling in Scotland, and it's doing Scotland no good, and it's doing the people of Scotland no good. We need to have some clarification around this.
Well, that's a good point, but then they might try and do what the Conservatives tried to do with the 1922 committee and change that rule as well. What do you make of that, James? Do you think that's a good idea? Perhaps there should be a limit on, or some time span between each referendum, and there should be some penalty if you don't win, that you can't just keep going on and on and on.
No, I don't actually, because basically I'm a great believer in the will of the people and democracy. Now, I'm a supporter of independence. I'm not particularly a supporter of the Scottish Government. I think they're handling a lot of issues in Scotland is particularly misplaced, but also particularly the response to COVID, I think, was draconian at times. But we need to separate the issue, I think, between the SNP and actually independence. I'm a great believer Independence, first of all, is for the people rather than politics. And for me, Scottish independence is more about independence politically combined with independence for the people. Now, I think there should be a properly ratified independence referendum. We've almost had 10 years here. A lot of circumstances have changed in Scotland since then. And also it's about the aspect of democracy. So the Tories, for instance, Tory government, have not won a national election in Scotland for over 65 years. And that's not really the best aspects of democracy. So I think one thing I do agree with Neil is I think we do need to bring it on and actually have a referendum whereby if the British government are confident that the Unionists will win, then they should have that referendum. Now, based on the last referendum in 2014, the polls were miles apart at the start of the campaign. It looked like it was going to be a clear win for the Unionists, but the polls did narrow, albeit the No campaign won in the end. But I'm a great believer...
But Neil also mentioned that perhaps the people in England should be able to vote as well.
No, it's up to the individuals in a particular country, because Scotland has a different set of circumstances in terms of tax, in terms of measures under devolution, in terms of health and education, and they actually live there. It's up to the will of the people in that country to decide. If, for instance, people in England wanted to decide that England should be independent, then the same rules would apply to them. So I think it's in the basis of where you actually live that decides the referendum. But I think we're at a point now whereby if the unions are confident that they'll win again, they'll win again. That's the will of the people. That's democracy. That's a healthy thing.
Well, I hear that, but if you'd accepted the democracy, then literally from the time that the Scottish Independence Party lost the referendum, you said we've had 10 years. We've had 10 years of them campaigning for another referendum. Yeah, that's all absolutely. We've had, isn't it? There's not been anything, Michelle.
Yeah, that is exactly the problem. The independence campaign, if you want me to talk about that rather than the SNP, the independence campaign's version of democracy is that they launch the next campaign the day after they lose. So, this isn't democracy at all. This is an absolute onslaught. And part of the way they're dealing with that is by changing the rules across the board. So they introduce younger voters in the hope that they will then support their idea. They change the way in which they educate people in school about politics and democracy in the hope that they'll influence the vote next time round. We are literally under siege day after day after day, and we're not allowed to focus on the things that really matter to people. We're not allowed to focus on building Scotland up and enhancing the relationship we have with the UK. It is very interesting that in this white paper that they've just produced today, they talk about the relationship across the UK deteriorating, having worked really well for the first 17 years. And I would point out to them, it is really since Nicola Sturgeon took control that things have deteriorated. Now, maybe it's because of the way she behaves. Maybe it's her sort of anti-English rhetoric that the party constantly put out now. It's the divisiveness with which they talk about it. It's the way in which they twist facts to try and make out that Scotland is hard done by. This is not the state of affairs that the majority of the country in Scotland want to live in. And yet it's forced upon us because they don't really believe in democracy. If they believed in democracy, they would listen to the majority. The majority voted against an independent state. They want to stay part of the UK. In the same way that the majority of the UK voted to leave the EU. And it's time that they did what they talk about and respect democracy.
James, final word to you.
Yeah, but part of the remit was that there'd only be another referendum if circumstances changed. One of those circumstances being obviously the vote on Brexit, which roughly 2 out of 3 people in Scotland voted for Remain. The circumstances have also changed in terms of some of the appalling measures that have happened with the Conservative government at Westminster. We touch on a point that Neil said about in terms of would independence work financially. We've currently got a national debt of north of 2 trillion in the UK. So it's a bit rich of the UK government saying that Scotland couldn't actually afford being independent, when actually the UK government and the UK as a whole in terms of balance of payments and national debt is off the scale in terms of debt. I think what we've got to do is look at the circumstances which have changed.
Scotland has a 22% deficit right now.
Well, apparently Scotland does have a 22% deficit. And just to bring you back with it, last year's autumn budget pledged a record 41 billion per year to Scotland. So Scotland is actually receiving a lot of money from England. Listen, this conversation could go on forever, but James and Nicola Sturgeon certainly won't let it go. James Melvin, thank you so much for joining me, and also Michelle Ballantyne, thank you very much. Right, this is GB News. You're watching me. I'm Nana Akwe. This is Brazier. We are live on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, let's talk strikes, because the train drivers' union, ASLEF, has today announced on the 30th of July they're going to be striking over a pay dispute. And it means that 6,000 more drivers will be brought into the fray in the national rail disputes. The RMT union yesterday announced a similar walkout, which will take place on the 27th of July, which will impact Network Rail, with 40,000 members all taking action. Now, joining me is the transport journalist and author Christian Wolmer. Right, well, which rail services will be affected with these strikes? There seem to be so many of them. Oh, that's not Christian. That's not Christian.
Yes,
oh, there you go. I was thinking, who's that? If you're listening on the radio, it certainly wasn't Christian. He's not. He's
just
not
become transgender.
Yeah. Christian, what do you think?
Don't go there. Very complicated, because there's two completely different series of strikes going on now. So there's the RMT strikes against some train operators and against Network Rail on the 27th. And then there's some ASLEF strikes against about half the train operators on the 30th, which is the Saturday. So people are going to be disrupted in different places on these different days.
Though, but part of the reasoning, because they're saying it's pay disputes, and this is the main reason. But there's also been talks about the fact that there are elements of the railways that could be automated, which would reduce the need and make the need for many members of staff, and actually cause redundancies as well. What is your view on the strikes? Do you think that this is something that they should be doing?
That's a bit of a red herring, actually, because the government is keen to be saying, well, we're going to have driverless trains soon, and we're going to be able to automate vast amounts of the processes. There's been technological change on the railway ever since they were first invented in 1830, and that will continue. But the key issue here is wages. And the key problem, really, is that this is being done by proxy. In other words, the real person who can make a difference and can make deals and offers is Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary. The train companies are stuck as piggy in the middle between Grant Shapps on the one hand and the unions on the other. And as the unions quite rightly keep on pointing out, if only they could get round a table with Grant Shapps, and that he was honest enough to admit that actually he holds the purse strings and he is the one able to cut a deal, then we might see some progress. But instead, we have this standoff with the two sides shouting at each other, with the train operating companies stuck in the middle.
But the only people, I mean, I was reading, one of the newspapers, they were saying that the only people they're really striking against is the public, because we're the ones that will actually suffer. There's a cost of living crisis at the moment. We're lucky to find money in anything. So those who are working, and you've heard that some of the average salaries that have been paid for many members who work for the railways isn't actually that bad. So a lot of people were just saying, well, we're the only people that were suffering, and where do you think the money's going to come from?
Well, first of all, I mean, the train drivers are paid quite well, but they haven't had a pay rise in nearly 3 years. Many of the other staff are paid well below their average wage, pretty basic stuff. And essentially what we're saying, or what the government is saying, is you have to take a cut in your living standards. While, as the unions point out, a lot of the managers, a lot of highly paid staff have received quite high extra payments, and yet they are expected to have increases well below the rate of inflation. Nobody is, and they're not even expecting, frankly, to be paid the rate of inflation, which, as you know, is heading towards 11%. They would probably be satisfied with 7 or 8%, and they've been offered a mere 4%. So that represents a 6 or 7% loss in their effectively in their take-home pay, just for just because of the inflation situation. And it's quite understandable that they don't want to accept that. I mean, would you accept that?
Well, I mean, you know, because it's sort of a crossover, isn't it? Because in terms of, because I think a lot of people might not understand fully how these transport companies work, because aren't they partly privatised? So elements of them are private companies. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, no, they are.
Right, so in a private company. So isn't Grant Shapps' argument that he doesn't really negotiate really with private companies, because this is a private issue within those companies? So they are within their rights to pay somebody more or somebody less. I mean, that is the nature of things that sit in the private sector.
No, I'm afraid it's not that simple, because they all have contracts with the Department for Transport. And in those contracts, it essentially says that industrial relations issues are dealt with by the Department for Transport, not by the individual companies. I know a lot of these managers well, and they say to me, look, you know, we'd be quite happy to cut a deal with the unions, but we're not allowed to do so because the Department for Transport won't allow us to have that amount of flexibility and make deals. So it is all down to the government, and to pretend otherwise is, you know, just conning the public into thinking that it's nothing to do with them. And this is shocking, really. I mean, it's quite clear the government might want to say, well, no, you can't have any more money. Well, fine. Or they might want to say, OK, no, you can have some more money. But for them to just sit on their hands and say it's nothing to do with us, Gov, is just shameful. And hopefully maybe the new government, the new Transport Secretary, whoever that may be after September the 5th, might be aware of this.
You never know, Christian. It might end up being Grant Shapps again.
Yeah, it might well be.
So do you think that they're going to get what they want in this strike? Your final thoughts on that?
I think there will be something of a compromise. Look, I think when the public listens to their case, they say, well, we're a bit like this. You know, we're suffering from this cost of living crisis. You know, we can understand that people don't want to effectively not being able to live at the same standard as the year before, maybe not even manage to pay their mortgage or pay their rent or, have the same holidays they had last year, whatever. And I think a lot of people understand that. And so I think there's a surprising amount of sympathy towards the rail workers. And crucially, I think there's quite a lot of hostility towards the government, because people understand this is really on the government's plate.
Well, Christian, thank you so much for your thoughts. That's Christian Walmer. He's a transport journalist and an author. Let's see what my guest Neil Hamilton makes of that. The RMT strikes, 27th and now the 30th, ASLEF joining this as well. I mean, what do you think?
Well, this is an inevitable consequence of inflation. Those of us who can remember the 1970s, remember the industrial mayhem which occurred, because at that time we had an inflation rate nearly 3 times what we got now. 27% it peaked at. And what we've got here, as Christian Walmar's quite correctly pointed out, is something like power without responsibility, because we've had privatisation, but only half privatisation. It's heavily regulated. The price structure is regulated by the rail regulator, the Department of Transport. The subsidies are paid for by the taxpayer through the government to the rail companies. So there isn't any direct way of sorting this out unless, as Christian says, they all get around the table. Obviously, the government doesn't want to get involved because it doesn't want to hand over any more taxpayers' money. I mean, I've got every sympathy with a lot of the rail workers who are on strike, the tickets office clerks and so on, who are represented by the RMT. I mean, the train drivers who are now going to go on strike because ASLEF represents them, they earn on average 48,000, 50,000 a year, so which is, quite good money. But as Christian said, they haven't had a pay increase for the last 3 years. And with 11% inflation, everybody's going to be hit in the pocket. But everybody can't have an increase, otherwise inflation carries on going up if the government keeps validating that by printing more money to pay for it. Yeah. So some or other buck has got to stop. And but I think the government will have to get involved in this strike, because I can't see a solution to this unless they do.
Well, we'll all be... They'll be on strike soon, so just be warned. 27th to 30th, you're going to take the train, so they get it. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Back after the break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
It's just gone 5 o'clock. Good afternoon. If you've just joined me, I'm Nana Aquare. This is Brazier, fast-paced news from 4 till 6. And in this hour, today saw the candidates for the leadership of the Conservative Party whittled down even further. There's now just 5 candidates remaining in the race after Suella Braverman was knocked out. We'll have the latest reaction to the vote, and I'll speak to the spiked online Brendan O'Neill and our polling expert Joe Twyman. And as the weather heats up, I'll ask if our media's coverage of the heatwave has done the same, with alarmist language and warnings of potential emergency requiring the government's Cobra Committee to meet. I'll speak to author Laura Dodsworth and ask if coverage of the weather has become too extreme. And with me for the next 2 hours, UKIP leader Neil Hamilton. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. The top stories on GB News. The Attorney General, Suella Braverman, has been knocked out of the race to replace Prime Minister Boris Johnson. There are now 5 candidates left battling it out to lead the Conservative Party and ultimately the country. The second round of ballots has maintained ex-Chancellor Rishi Sunak's position as the front runner. Trade Minister Penny Mordaunt came in second. Sir Graham Brady, chair of the 1922 committee, says further rounds of voting will continue next week until 2 candidates are left.
Braverman is eliminated from the contest, and the others are able to go forward to a further ballot on Monday.
In other news, Scotland's First Minister says the UK is facing a shift to the right, whoever becomes the next Prime Minister. Nicola Sturgeon was speaking as she launched a second paper aimed at making a fresh case for Scotland to leave the UK. She says she thinks independence is now essential.
None of them seem to have anything to offer Scotland except democracy denial. So I don't see any of them offering anything positive for Scotland at all, and that's the problem. Scotland is facing yet another Prime Minister, the fourth in my time as First Minister, that we haven't voted for, would not vote for, and that will impose policies that we don't support.
In international news, Sri Lanka's President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has formally resigned after fleeing the country. He flew to Singapore this week after protesters converged on his presidential palace. Those demonstrators are currently celebrating on the streets. The unrest in Sri Lanka emerged as the country's food, fuel and medicines became scarce. Russian airstrikes have killed at least 20 people and reportedly even a baby in central Ukraine. President Zelensky says a medical centre and residential buildings were hit in downtown Vinnytsia. At least 90 people are reportedly injured. President Zelensky called the attack another act of Russian terrorism. Here, train drivers at 8 rail companies will go on strike on the 30th of July in a dispute over pay. That's in addition to a strike by RMT members on the 27th of this month. The train drivers at ASLEV are demanding a pay rise in line with inflation. The Department for Transport says drivers already earn significantly more than the average salary in the UK. 3 men accused of leading an organised crime group have been charged with people smuggling offences. They were among 4 people arrested by the National Crime Agency in East London and Essex on Tuesday. They're accused of attempting to smuggle people into the UK in the back of lorries. Low-income households will start receiving £326 from today, the first of 2 payments to ease the cost of living crisis. A second instalment of £324 will be transferred in the autumn. It's part of the government's £37 billion support package. One man, Alan Driver, who's already received the payment, told GB News some essentials, like ice cream, are going to be too expensive.
Everybody's had to go buy cheaper products, not name brands. And it's just detrimental, you know. People need a little something, make them feel good every now and then in life, you know. Whether that be a haircut, whether that be getting your nails done, or whether that be a bit of ice cream, you know. You know when that sound comes outside your door and that ice cream, and you can't buy the ice cream. That's sad. That's sad.
Emirates, the airline, has refused to cancel flights at Heathrow after the airport capped the number of daily passengers at 100,000 in total. Emirates says Heathrow only gave them 36 hours to comply and that rebooking passengers was now impossible because all its flights are full over the coming weeks. Heathrow says it would be disappointing if airlines put profit before passenger safety. You're up to date with GB News. More news as it happens. Now back to Nana Akua hosting Brazier.
It's fast approaching 7 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. You can also catch up on the GB News app. I'm Nana Akua. This, of course, is Brazier. Suella Braverman has been eliminated from the Conservative leadership contest after she received just 27 votes from Tory MPs. That is 5 less than she got yesterday. Rishi Sunak and Penny Mordaunt are at the top of the leaderboard for the support of their MPs, with 101 for Rishi and 83 votes for Penny. Liz Truss has 64, whilst Kemi Badenoch has 49, and Tom Tugendhat is at the back with 32. Right, let's see what UKIP leader Neil Hamilton makes of that. He joins me now. Neil, this is how it's looking. What's your view? Tom Tugendhat is at the bottom there. At one point, he was a big hopeful.
Yeah, I think he was bigging himself up too much right at the beginning, but that's what you would expect. He's obviously now going to be squeezed, and I think he'll be out next time round. My guess is that Kemi Badenoch will do quite well out of this. She'll put on more than the other candidates will proportionately. But the big question at the end of it all is, who's going to end up as the winner? And the balance of the parliamentary party now seems to be more with the right than the centre-left. So whoever emerges to fight Sunak, presumably he will be in the final 2, will, I think, end up with more votes than him.
But Sunak was such a, everyone thought that it's definitely going to be him. I think even he thought it was going to be him.
Yeah.
But now he might not end up in the final 2, actually. It could end up being Penny and also Liz Truss, because where would, say, Tom Tugendhat, he's 32 votes, where would they go? Where do you think that they would likely land?
Well, I think the bulk of them are not going to go to Liz Truss or to Penny Mordaunt. I think Sunak will be the principal beneficiary of them. But at the end of the day, we're dealing with the world's most duplicitous electorate here. MPs, and it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen. But the big problem is that we're whittling the contest down to the most colourless candidate.
I know, I was going to say.
We'll have two vanilla candidates, one with black hair, one with blonde hair, and yet neither of them do we know very much about their personal views, what really motivates them. What's the difference between them? It's hard to tell at the minute.
And I'm still not quite comfortable with Penny Mordaunt's stance when she said the trans woman is a woman and a trans man is a man. You just can't. And then her justification for it didn't really work out well for me either.
Yeah. Well, her twin brother seems to be a sort of Stonewall activist. I guess that may be one inhibitor on her on this particular issue. But of course, the woke agenda goes much wider than just transgender. And that's the really worrying thing, is what we're going to do to stop the cancel culture and protect the rights of free speech in this country and get rid of this tyranny which has developed, which is costing people their jobs and livelihoods and leading to all sorts of health issues as well. We live in a kind of big brother society, but not one which is imposed by the government.
And Grant Shapps, when he sort of dismissed that as a worthwhile conversation, he was quite quickly dispatched with too. But I'm now joined by Brendan O'Neill, who is Spiked Online chief political writer. Brendan, thank you so much for joining me. Now, you are backing Kemi Badenoch. Why?
I think she is easily the most interesting, dynamic candidate. I think she understands this country very well. She's proud to be British. She understands the importance of Brexit, the importance of sovereignty, and the importance of understanding how we want to control our borders. And she's not afraid to fight the culture wars. And I think fighting the culture wars is actually incredibly important. Lots of people present the culture wars as just a frivolous sideshow distracting us from the real issues. But actually, when the history of this country is under attack, when the very idea of sex and tradition and family is under attack, when every facet of how we live and how we think is constantly being assaulted by these new culture warriors, I actually think it's very important to get in there, to defend some pretty good and important values, and to stand on the side of ordinary people who are sick of this top-down elite politics. So she's willing to do that, which I think marks her out as a really special candidate in this race.
What do you make of Suella Braverman then? She's been eliminated. Was she somebody that you would have put on your list as somebody you'd like to see in the top job?
Yeah, Suella Braverman, I think, was good. She had a lot of good, she made some good comments. I think she's got some good ideas. I like what she says about Brexit. My issue with Suella, to a certain extent, was that I don't think she would connect with the public as well as Kemi Badenoch would, simply because her style of delivery wasn't always great. She wasn't clear all the time where she was standing. I think one of the great benefits of Kemi Badenoch's campaign is that she not only says good, interesting things, but she has a good style, a good delivery. I think she would connect with ordinary people in a way that, for example, I'm not sure that Rishi Sunak would. Someone like Rishi Sunak comes off as an old-style, Blairite, technocratic politician, a bit stiff, far too polished, far too practiced, far too spun. And I think people have had enough of spun politicians. They want someone who seems a bit more real, a bit more honest, and a bit more willing to have the important fights.
You missed out, smug. I was going to say. Now I read something that you wrote, which I thought was fascinating, really, when you talked about the behaviour of the media and how you were way more insulted by the way the media literally dispatched of Boris than anything that Boris did himself. And if we look at the way the media are behaving, would you say that they're sort of behaving themselves a bit better now? Because for me, it was a really horrible thing that I watched. I didn't like the way ITV, BBC, Sky News, I didn't like the way they covered it. I didn't like their stance and attack on Boris. Do you think that perhaps they're sitting back a bit now and backing off on all of that?
Yeah, I think the role the media played in toppling Boris, essentially, was really quite shocking. I think they played a very important role, firstly, by blowing up those two pathetic scandals, Pinchergate and Partygate, neither of which were exactly Watergate or the Profumo affair, but they blew them all out of proportion in order to weaken Boris. And then they essentially goaded the rebels to have a go at him. So the media played an orchestrating role in all of that. And I believe in democracy, and therefore the fact that a prime minister elected into power by 14 million people can be toppled in this way is really worrying. I think what the media does next will be interesting. One of the things I think is quite shocking from the more liberal media is the way they are talking about candidates like Kemi Badenoch as, the wrong kind of ethnic minority person. She doesn't have the right views. We're already seeing undertones of people saying, well, she's a black face for Tory politics, and really she's a cover for the kind of white supremacy that the government wants to pursue. Really racist stuff, in my view. We're starting to see that identity politics is a gateway drug to old-fashioned racism, where people are judged worthy of belonging to an ethnic minority according to whether they have the right views. I think we're going to see more of that from the media, and I think that will antagonize large sections of the public too.
Yeah, Brendan, thank you so much. Your view is really good to talk to you. That is Brendan O'Neill. He's the chief political writer for Spiked. Absolutely fascinating. Yes, what do you think then? Because that's something that I observed, what he's talking about in terms of ethnic candidates as well. Because I heard somebody calling, someone like me a gatekeeper.
Yeah.
Which is basically because I don't represent the majority of people who are of colour, therefore I am a representative and brought on by the right to... that's the first I've heard of it. Nobody told me I was. I just came in and had my life and do what I'm doing. But what do you think?
Well, I've heard this before. You're called coconuts, black on the outside or brown on the outside,
exactly.
White on the inside.
All sorts of things.
It's monstrous, actually. If you don't conform to the left stereotype view of what black or coloured people or people of colour, as I have to say now, are supposed to think, then they're immediately dismissed as Uncle Toms or whatever. That's what the old term for this, which is, of course, completely false. And I totally agree with Brendan O'Neill about Kemi Badenoch. I would certainly be voting for her in this part of the contest. She is a breath of fresh air. Was it Mark Harper talking about Rishi Sunak being a breath of fresh air? He is actually a breath of stale air.
She's stagnant.
Exactly. Whereas Kemi Badenoch is the really refreshing candidate in this election. And I think Brendan was quite right. She does have the skills, the media skills, which would be transformative for this government if she were to emerge as the leader at the end of the poll. I agree with him also that Suella was a very good candidate, but she doesn't have the common touch which Kemi could bring to this. So I hope the Tory MPs will continue to support her, and perhaps some of them come back from Mordaunt or Truss to support her in this next stage of the contest.
Well, exactly. It's not a done and dusted deal. Whilst people are saying that Rishi Sunak has it in the bag and that he'll be in the top two, he might not be. And his votes that he hit, they don't keep adding more. They re-vote again, don't they? So everybody votes again.
Every stage of this contest is a rerun of the whole thing.
Rerun. So he may say something or do something and they may get jitters and decide they don't want him to be in that.
There are no votes in the bag which you can rely upon. Everybody ultimately can change their opinion as the contest goes on, as we see more of the candidates and as the issues are themselves refined.
And as there's a weekend, people can mull it over the weekend. Right, so joining me now is GB News' political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, would you say that it's actually clear now who that front runner is?
No, it's really not. I think if anything is clear this afternoon is that there is no clear front runner. Yes, Rishi Sunak, the former Chancellor, is out in the lead. But frankly, he's not hoovering up as many MPs as he probably needs to at this stage if he was to guarantee himself a first position in this race, or even to end up in the top two. It is possible that he is starting to stutter, though he still remains clearly probably the most formidable candidate in this process. Same could be said of Liz Truss, actually, as well. She only picked up 13 MPs today, not quite the stonking performance she needed after a pretty mediocre start yesterday. The one person who does still seem to have a tide of momentum behind them is Penny Mordaunt. I say a tide rather than the tsunami, because again, it is not overwhelming, but it is clearly heading in her direction. And so this race, frankly, is pretty wide and open. And I wouldn't like to be a Medi man to say who definitely is going to be in those final two, even though we clearly do have at least three front runners, though, Badenoch supporters have continually said what they wanted to do this week was to get her into this stage of the process so that she could take part in these crucial TV debates we're likely to say play out over the next coming days. There's one being hosted by Channel 4 tomorrow night, and it's just been confirmed in the last hour or so, Nana, that all the candidates will take place in that. That could be a very crucial moment for her and indeed for all the candidates. So, frankly, looking at this contest, it is wide open. Lots of MPs have still, frankly, to make up their minds. The big question is, where will Suella Braverman's votes go to? She had, in and around 30 MPs. She's now out of the race. Will they automatically switch, as some might presume, to Liz Truss as kind of the other right-wing candidate? Could some of them go to Badenoch? It really is fascinating. And also there is pressure on Tom Tugendhat, the kind of liberal candidate, if you like, in this process, for him to drop out, though he is insisting this afternoon that is not going to happen. He clearly wants to take part in those TV debates as well. But if he was to do so before Monday's third round, again, it's not entirely sure where his block of MPs would go to. So, you know what, Nana? It is interesting, it's fascinating, it's unpredictable, it's a little bit exciting, and in the end, it really is too early to call.
It is a bit. All those votes could go elsewhere. Darren McCaffrey, thank you very much for your thoughts. Right, lots of you have been getting in touch with your views on the leadership contest. Let's see. Richard says, our next Prime Minister must be a woman and not the backstabbing Rishi Sunak. Sandy says, I've been devastated by the ousting of Boris. Yeah, me too, Sandy. It's terrible, isn't it? She says, I will never forgive the Conservative Party and I'll never vote for them again. Now, hold on a minute, Sandy. If you don't vote for them, then you are opening the door to people like Sir Keir Starmer or a potential Lib Lab pact, so it's up to you. Matthew says, but I do agree with you. Matthew says, did Rishi Sunak ask Lord Frost to stab Penny Mordaunt in the back? Both have already committed this crime. And Dawn says, if Penny Mordaunt and Rishi Sunak are the two that go through to the Conservative members' vote, most likely we'll end up with Rishi because members are already questioning Penny Mordaunt's credentials. John says, I've seen a few interviews from candidates, spokespeople, stating that we need a fresh start, clean break at delivering the 2019 manifesto, which I, of course, agree with. However, that would mean immigration for one thing, and the only candidate to have a grip on it, Suella Braverman, has now been eliminated. Let's see what Lydia says. Lydia says, what can we do if we have a vote but don't like the two of the MPs that have been chosen? Bit of a stitch-up already. And Patricia says Rishi Sunak is not Prime Minister material. He won't win the next election. He gave too much away. Not so well off folk talk about that. He most certainly will not hold the red wall. These MPs have not spoken to the average guy, or they would know this already. And I'll do one more, go on then. John says this idea that Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss will appeal to the red wall is ridiculous. If one of them wins the leadership, Labour will win the next election. Getting rid of Boris, then picking an unelectable leader as a Tory member, I despair. Neil, that's what people are saying. I was actually annoyed by the way they unceremoniously dropped Boris Johnson in that manner. I mean, you don't seem to be... do you think it was the right thing that they did, looking at what they're offering now?
Well, I think Boris mishandled all those minor crises monumentally badly. And so I think he's got only himself to blame for what happened in the event. There's no point in complaining, I think, about the way the media handles these things. Enoch Powell used to say that for a politician to complain about the media is like a captain complaining about the sea. You know, it's a constant of your life.
But it was a little bit excessive. I mean, even those outside, even those who instigated it, admit that it was a bit overboard.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I've lived through this many times.
Yeah, you have as well. Yeah, of course.
My lifetime. Yeah. So I've been the quarry in this hunt many times in the past. So I do know what it's like to feel you've been unfairly treated, misrepresented, and so on and so forth. But, you know, that's just a fact of life. You've got to be able to deal with it. And I'm afraid Boris was too cavalier about it. And he could have handled himself better to maximise his chances of survival. Because when you look at, what Brendan O'Neill was saying earlier on, when you look at Partygate...
Nothing.
There was nothing there, really. I mean, there was the hypocrisy, of course, that you're making the laws but not keeping to them. And the Chris Pincher affair was an absurdity as well. You know, it's personal indiscretion by Pincher. And he'll have to pay the price for that, no doubt. And Boris should just have said at the beginning, well, yes, we did know these rumours were there, but I appointed him because I thought he deserved a second chance. And it would have been good, yeah. But he didn't do that. So he allowed the the handling of the issue to become more important than the issue itself.
Well, if you just joined me, of course, that is Neil Hamilton. You're with me. I'm Nana Akwe. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. We'll be back after this short break.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Cloudy skies and some showers in the north today, feeling cooler here, but there will still be some warm sunshine in the south. The reason being high pressure remains close by. It is edging closer to the UK over the next few days, but around the top of that high, well, we've currently got cooler conditions, cloudier weather from the Atlantic, and some showers. Those showers on the heavy side in places, particularly over the Pennines, the higher parts of Scotland as well, but through the evening they die away. Clear skies in the south through the day, extending fairly widely at first overnight, but then another area of cloud moves in, turning things a bit more damp across western and central Scotland, Northern Ireland by the end of the night. 13 or 14 Celsius in the north, 11 to 13 Celsius overnight in the south with the clear skies. So not an oppressive night for sleeping, a bit more comfortable than, say, earlier in the week. A bright start, though, for southern areas first thing, and after any early rain across Scotland and northern England clears away, well, skies brighten here as well with a few showers developing. It looks like a sunnier day for Northern Ireland, 20 Celsius here, 24 in Cardiff, 27 in London, where it will also be sunny, but showers will keep it cooler for central and southern Scotland and northern England. And those showers continue into Friday evening before eventually it turns drier. And what's happening later Friday is high pressure is starting to build more widely across the UK. There'll still be some cloudier skies and some rain in the far northwest of Scotland, but otherwise clear skies across much of the country, and it's turning warmer, 16 Celsius as we start Saturday in London. Saturday starts off with plenty of sunshine as that high pressure re-exerts its influence across the UK. Still some rain in the far north of Scotland, but otherwise Sunday and Monday increasing amounts of sunshine and, more significantly, increasing temperatures.
I'm Patrick Christys.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News. We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christys, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good afternoon. It is fast approaching 29 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, trading standards in England and Wales have been warned that the market has been filled with unsafe vapes which are aimed at children. Colourful, sweet-flavoured devices are growing in popularity among teenagers, and teachers have been warned that they're actually becoming commonplace in secondary schools. Now, according to the health charity ASH, 14% of 16 and 17-year-olds and 7% of 11 to 17-year-olds are now regular vapers. So how much of a risk does this pose to the health of British teenagers? Well, joining me now is NHS doctor Veena Babu and also Julia Krill, Communications Manager for the World Vapers Alliance. Right, so I'm going to start with you, Doctor, first, because I want to know, a lot of people say these vapes are fine. I mean, I don't like any of that. I'm not convinced. But a lot of people say they're fine. They're harmless. They've got nicotine in, which is less harmful than tobacco. And, you know, they don't do any harm to people around them either. Why are they a concern, if they are at all?
Well, I can assure you they're not fine, firstly. You have to take it into context. If you're someone who's a heavy smoker, smoking about 15 to 20 a day for, say, 15 years, for someone like that to quit smoking, a vape might be fine because you're getting off the toxic substances with a cigarette and you're just, substituting it for something that has small amounts of nicotine, which can help with the addiction. And over time, we can wean you off that. But we're now talking about young children with lungs that are just kind of functioning how they should. Now, giving those lungs high amounts of nicotine unnecessarily is absolutely not fine. And we're talking about things like lung collapse, pneumonias, and addiction for children. So I would definitely not be advocating that these are fine for any child.
But what about for those who are sort of older? So 18 years upwards, you're fine with that, but you're really looking at the fact that it's younger people that are getting involved with this. That's the real concern for these. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. So if, say, you are a heavy smoker, we have to understand smoking, especially if you've done it for a long period of time and a large amount. Yes, there are patches. Yes, there are tablets. There's counseling. There's hypnotherapy. But it is a real addiction and it's a problem. And we have to be non-judgmental when we look at these patients and say, OK, if it helps you to vape, to get off cigarettes, and we need to think, how can we wean you off? So eventually, the end goal is to completely stop. The end goal isn't pick up a new habit, which kind of damages your lungs. And that's why I was saying, when you look at just children, it's definitely not a good thing. But if someone is a heavy smoker, for them, this might be maybe recommended initially to get off the cigarettes, but not for someone who's just looking to pick up a social hobby, as per se.
Well, Julia, you're the communications manager for the World Vapers Alliance. Surely there's some sort of way you don't allow young people to come and buy these vapes, because I mean they've got to get hold of them first of all. What kind of things are in place to stop young people from getting their hands on these?
Yes, absolutely. So the teenagers. Vapes are not designed for teenagers or children. They're designed to help people stop smoking. It's a harm reduction tool. It is not designed for children. And teenagers and children, they need to be protected by smart regulations and by enforcing the existing ones, which are creating the age barrier when you can buy vape and similar sort of regulations. So vaping should be considered as an alternative to smoking. It's a tool to quit smoking.
Well, very briefly though, some of these vapes are like little wonderful flavours that attract children. So you'll have bubblegum flavour and stuff like that, which is hardly adult. Would you not say that some of them are actually designed in a way to attract young people?
Flavors are designed in a way to help smokers forget the taste of tobacco, because when smokers would be vaping electronic cigarettes that have only tobacco flavor, they would eventually relapse and go back to smoking. So that is why we receive dozens and hundreds of testimonials from people who actually tried several different methods to quit smoking, including cold turkey, nicotine patches, etc. But vaping was exactly the tool that helped them stop smoking, because there was a large availability of flavors to don't remember the taste of the traditional cigarette.
I suppose in a way you both agree that it should really be older people that are doing this, but young people are being drawn to it. Julia Kroll, thank you so much, and also Dr. Veena Babu. Good to talk to you both. Right now, we've got plenty more on the way on the programme today, but first, let's bring you up to date with the latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. The latest headlines. The Attorney-General, Suella Braverman, has been knocked out of the race to replace Boris Johnson. So there are now 5 candidates left battling it out to lead the Tories and ultimately the country, and hoping to move on from months of scandal. The second round of ballots has kept ex-Chancellor Rishi Sunak the front runner with 101 votes. Trade Minister Penny Mordaunt came in second with 83 votes. Sir Graham Brady, chairman of the Conservative Party's 1922 committee, said further rounds of voting will continue next week until 2 candidates are left. Ms Braverman says she's grateful for the opportunity to run.
We ran a really clear policy platform on illegal migration, on Brexit delivery, on tax cuts, on identity politics. And I have to say, I'm just so blown away by the positive response that I got personally and on my policy platform. I want to thank all of the MPs who voted for me, put their faith in me, my team of MPs who worked incredibly hard, my staff team, the party, the 1922 committee. I just feel a huge amount of gratitude and actual privilege to have just run to be Prime Minister of this country.
In international news, Sri Lanka's President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has formally resigned after fleeing the country. He flew to Singapore this week after protesters converged on the presidential palace. Those demonstrators are now celebrating on the streets. The unrest in Sri Lanka emerged as the country ran out of food, fuel and medicine. And another rail strike's taking place on the 30th of July. The ASLEF union says train drivers at 8 rail companies have all voted to walk out in a dispute over pay. It follows an announcement by RMT members that they'll take strike action on the 27th of July. Those are the latest news headlines. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News. Brazier will be here in just a moment. First, let's get the finance news.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Quick snapshot of the markets for you. The pound will buy you $1.182 and 1.177 euros. And if you want to buy an ounce of gold, it's going to set you back £1,447 and 16 pence for an ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good afternoon. If you just joined me, this is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akwe and this is Brazier. Now, Cabinet Office Minister Kit Malthouse is to chair meetings of the government's Cobra Civil Contingencies Committee on the heat wave. Now, the Prime Minister's official spokesman said that the move was a progression of the significant work that had already been done to prepare. It comes as the Met Office has predicted record-breaking temperatures which are on the cards for early next week, also apparently Sunday as well, although some people count Sunday as the first day of the week, where the mercury could climb to 35 degrees Celsius in some parts of the UK. And I have to say that I was just looking around, just put in heat wave, and I found heat wave plan for England, protecting health and reducing harm from severe heat and heat waves. It's a UK Health Security Agency and NHS drafted document that has quite a few pages on it. Now, author of A State of Fear, Laura Dodsworth, joins me now. Laura, it is a state of fear. Why do you think the coverage of the heat wave has been so, I've got to say, it's alarmist. I do heat yoga 4 times a week, for goodness sake. It's 40 degrees in there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the way that we report on the weather has changed. At the moment, I think you'd be forgiven for thinking that a nice hot summer is the onset of Armageddon. Now, whether the weather has changed or not is really a separate conversation. That's one for meteorologists. But the way we report on weather has changed. If I think back to the way heat waves were reported on earlier in my life, there've been a number of them. You would see weather maps with a nice sunny sticker on the part of the country that was fortunate enough to be enjoying good weather. Now what we see are maps shaded in red, deep red, with exclamation marks. And that red is supposed to signal hot, fire, warning, danger. You're supposed to be left in no doubt that hot, sunny weather is in fact calamitous. Now there's a reason for this, and it's because what's really supposed to be changing is you, us, our behaviour. On the 1st of November in 2021, the government's nudge unit issued a joint report with the broadcaster Sky called The Power of TV, Nudging Consumers to Net Zero. And that report talked about various ways that TV and the media can be used to soften people up for net zero policies, including things like segments in news programmes, changing the storylines of dramas and soap operas, documentaries, and of course weather reports. In fact, weather reports are mentioned 3 times specifically in this report about how they can be used to make people aware of environmental change. So I think that what we're seeing here is essentially a temperature check for how nudge is being used in the media.
Sounds like propaganda to me. I mean, should we be that concerned about it? I get it. They're trying to make us think that we're about to fry and that global warming is taking hold. And even when it gets cold, they tell us it's global warming as well. So even if it's cold, it's still the same thing that's happening to us. Do you think that there's echoes of what they did with COVID?
Yeah, I think propaganda is definitely one word you could apply to this. You have to remember that propaganda isn't necessarily about falsehoods. I'm not commenting on whether the climate's changing, whether weather's changing. It doesn't appear to be to me, but I'm not a meteorologist or an expert. Propaganda is about softening people up towards political goals and amplifying certain messages. We're supposed to definitely be drawing on the fact that the weather's changing, and this is part of a deliberate plan to nudge us towards net zero. Now, I think how you respond to that will say a lot about you ideologically and politically. Some of us won't like the reach of the nanny state into something as innocuous as the weather report. Other people will think this is a really valid tool to get people worried about climate. But I think, you know, you mentioned that we get the same with the winter reports. I'm not sure we really do, actually. There are weather warnings for winter. But I'll give you an example. The Met Office just released a tweet about its amber weather warning. And on one tweet, it had 5 exclamation mark emojis and language like extremely high temperatures, weather warning. It was very alarmist language. And with it was a video which highlighted the health risks associated to being in the heat. Now, I don't think we'll see the same kind of weather warnings as we nudge towards zero. Nobody is unaware at the moment that we've got an energy crisis, and many, many more people die from cold homes than they do in heat waves. Are we going to be told that old people are going to die under blankets in their homes? You know, this is what fuel poverty means. On average, 10,000 people a year die from cold homes. So I don't think that the weather report is used in the same way, because I do think it's being used in order to leverage people towards political goals.
Well, they should be saying to us, hey, look, you don't need to put your thermostat on, you're going to save all this money. Instead of with these astronomical heat and gas prices, you can get out of it by just staying in your house. Laura, thank you so mumuch for joining me. That's Laura Dodsworth. She's the author of A State of Fear. Now, today we're focusing on the Conservative leadership election. Suella Braverman, she's been eliminated from the contest after she only got 27 votes from her Tory MPs. Now, that's 5 less than she got the day before. So joining me now is an MP who was originally supporting Sajid Javid, but now backs Kemi Badenoch. So welcome. Thank you very much for joining me. Why are you backing Kemi?
Good evening. Well, I believe Kemi offers us a fresh approach to politics. I think she's a breath of fresh air. I think she's a straight talker who says what she thinks, and she actually is someone who I believe can really lead our party and be our Prime Minister into the future.
Do you think? Some people would say that she, obviously, while she does have quite a bit of experience, she doesn't have real kind of government, proper, true kind of cabinet experience, and that would be, and also a lot of people don't know of her.
Well, I accept there'll be lots of people who don't know of her. That's why we're excited that she's got through this round of the votes, and then she'll have the opportunity to participate in debates this weekend, which will give many people the opportunity to see her and get to know her more. But I believe she has demonstrated, she's been in many ministerial roles. She has an excellent track record. You talk to people who have worked closely with her. She's someone who gets things done. And I believe that's the sort of person we need to be Prime Minister now.
I think what you said there, though, could apply to a lot of people. What about how whether she would stand up against someone like Sir Keir Starmer, and whether she'd actually be an election winner at the end of the day if she were to become the leader of the Conservative Party?
I absolutely believe that. I believe she is our best bet going into a general election. I believe she's Labour's worst nightmare in many ways, because she says what people are thinking, and she's got an absolutely direct approach, which I believe is something the British public want. I believe she has the opportunity to rebuild trust in our politics, which is something we absolutely need to do. And she's someone who has a really clear vision for our country and a plan to deliver that vision. And I believe that is exactly what our party is going to need going into a future general election.
I feel like you're talking about me, Steve, there. Now, if Kemi is knocked out, then who would be your next favourite?
It's a question I get asked, and I have to say, honestly, right now I'm focusing on getting Kemi into the next round. We're focusing on the debates this weekend and then the vote on Monday. And I believe she's got momentum. She's getting people, the more people see her and understand what she's about, the more people are coming on board and backing her. And I believe that we can do that again over this weekend, and we can see her vote go up on Monday, and that's what we want to focus on.
OK, but then if she does get knocked out, though, who do you think would take her votes? Who's most likely with regard to, you know, where do you think her...
Yeah. Well, one of the things I've learned, and this is my third leadership election campaign since being an MP, is that MPs make up their own mind. There's this, you know, some people try and say, oh, that people who have backed one candidate, if they drop out, they will en masse go and back someone else. I find that just very rarely happens. People make their own choices about who to back. and if the person you back drops out, as happened with me with Sajid Javid, you then look at who's left and make your mind up about who to get behind. And I think that will happen. Whoever drops out in the next round, that's the people who have backed them will make up their own mind who is the next best person for them to follow.
Well, listen, Steve, everyone I speak to about Kemi has always only good things to say about her, so she's obviously got something going for her. Steve Double, thank you very much for talking to me. He's a Conservative MP for St Austell and New Quay. So joining me in the studio this afternoon is Neil Hamilton. Neil, you've heard what he says. He's sort of in support of Kemi, just like you, and in fact, just like a lot of people. I mean, what is it that's so great about Kemi?
Well, I thought it was really interesting that he was a Sajid Javid supporter and now come to Kemi. I think that's very good news for her. Shows how fluid this contest can be. I mean, I think she's, such a breath of fresh air on a whole range of issues. We're just talking about the weather and global warming. She's the only candidate, as far as I can see, in this contest who is prepared to talk sensibly about net zero and the fact that, we're basically, I just got a bit of a cramp in my leg.
Sorry about that. I thought you were falling off then, Neil. I was a bit concerned then.
And we're not going to be able physically to create an electricity grid which will be able to cope with net zero, even if we ever achieve it. And the bigger issue, of course, of whether this global warming actually matters very much in the grand scheme of things anyway. So, I mean, she's really bringing into this campaign real issues that are hitting people in their pockets in a big way. And she's the one that could make a real difference. So I don't think that people should vote for any of the dismal candidates who are too scared to say anything which really matters. Vote for the person who's really going to liven things up.
You see, you're saying that. I've not heard anything that Kemi has to say much. So I think this weekend is probably about her getting out there and getting that message across. Neil, we'll come back to you on that. But I want to talk about this particular case that's happening in America at the moment. It is a live case, so we can only talk about what is actually already open in the public domain. And this is obviously regarding Kevin Spacey. He's pleaded not guilty to the charges of sexual assault, which date back 17 years. This was in a hearing at the Old Bailey. Now, the Oscar-winning actor faces 4 charges of sexual assault and 1 count of causing a person to engage in penetrative sexual activity without consent. Now, Spacey has previously indicated that he strenuously denies the allegations made by 3 men, now in their 30s and 40s. So I'm joined now by Paul Dudridge, who's the host of the Politics People podcast. Paul, I mean, what can you tell us if you just bring us up to date with things at the moment?
Yeah, I think you just covered it really well, yes. Kevin Spacey continues to strenuously deny the charges against him, and he's pled not guilty to all 5 charges today. I think now, since entering his plea today, he now is facing a full trial. It's a year away. I think it's June 23 that the intended trial will be able to finally air these charges, and he's on unconditional bail until that time. I think the original charges were filed in May, but they had to wait until he was actually back in this country. He seems to have addresses in California and in London. He's back in the UK now to face these charges, which he did so at the Old Bailey today. But yeah, he's got a year to wait until the actual full trial. So again, another year. I mean, if you think that these charges, as you say, the allegations go back 17 years, I think, in some cases, in some of these charges. They were first brought to light around about 2017, where I think that this was the reason, if you remember the movie All the Money in the World, he was replaced by Christopher Plummer. He'd already shot his scenes in a movie playing J. Paul Getty, and he was replaced by Christopher Plummer at the last moment, so they had to reshoot. So this has been hanging over him now. The criminal aspect of this has been hanging over him since 2017, and so he's got another year before he can have another day in court.
Well, listen, Paul, thank you very much for your thoughts. That's Paul Dudridge from the Politics People podcast. Now, loads more here on GB News. Remember, you can always keep up with us on the GB News app, but up next, it's actually Jubes & Co with Michelle Dewberry, who's here in the studio. Michelle, good evening, or good afternoon even. What's coming up in your show?
Of course, we'll be looking at the Tory leadership competition, down to 5 now. So who's left? Who should be left? Is it the right 5 so far? And who, of course, will be the final one? Looking at that. The first cost of living payment hits people's bank accounts today in some cases. We'll be looking at that. Is it enough? Does it go far enough? What else do people need? And what has been the response generally to that payment, Nana? Also, I want to look at, do you remember the whole kind of super sponsor programmes in places like Scotland to welcome over Ukrainian refugees? Well, how are they going? The short answer, Nana, is not very well. We're in a situation now where having to put people in cruise ships. I laugh, but it's absolutely not funny. To me, it's a programme that was not thought through, so we'll be thinking about that. And the online safety bill has been delayed till the autumn, so I'm asking, is that a good idea or not?
Well, listen, Michelle, that's all on the way. Look forward to that one. Interesting stuff, what's happened to the people who've come in from Ukraine as well, with regard to the cruise ships. Now, if you've just been with me all afternoon, then you'll know that Neil has been joining me in the studio. Neil Hamilton is here. Yeah, Neil, heat waves, are you prepared for it? It's coming.
Well, I've seen this before. You know, in 1976, we had 18 days, one after the other, where the temperature was 30 degrees or more, and 5 where the temperature was up 95 degrees Fahrenheit, whatever that is in Celsius, 35 degrees, something of that kind. So I'm a bit blasé about it, really. As Laura Dodsworth was saying earlier on, we used to celebrate heat waves in the old days, and now we're being told that we've got to wrap ourselves up, keep indoors, don't go out into the sun. You know, the government will next be telling us, don't go on holidays to hot countries, you know, go to the Arctic Circle in order to have your summer holiday. So this is really a lot of nonsense, isn't it? It's all alarmism. I suppose it sells newspapers, but whether people pay any attention to it or not, I don't know, because I think people are pretty phlegmatic at the end of the day. You know, they like the sunshine because it's such a relief from the rest of the year in what we know of the British weather. So I'm all for it. Bring it on.
Your final thoughts then on the leadership that's obviously, I personally think that they should have left what they had, because it's just, I'm just tired of it all. You know, I'd like them to get on with the business of actually running the country, but every time something difficult comes into play, they suddenly find something to do. But what's your final thoughts?
Yeah, well, the one thing you can say about Boris, which everybody agrees with, he was a character. Everybody knows who he is. And that's what we need in politics. We need a bit of pizzazz, a bit of life in the contest. And so many of the candidates are just bland and boring, aren't they? And they're too careful for their own good, really. They're always watching what they're saying and trying to explain away anything which might be regarded as controversial, might upset one small segment of their supposed electorate. So I say bring on the candidates who are prepared to say the things that are surprising, unusual in the context of politics at that level. And certainly bring in the candidates who are prepared to go against the grain of conventional wisdom, because so often conventional wisdom is conventionally wrong.
Well, unless, of course, they're saying a trans woman is a woman and a trans man is a man. I mean, honestly, I don't know. I don't know how Penny's going to get out of that one, but we shall see. Maybe the penny will drop.
Boom, boom.
Well, I've got to say that's it all we've got time for with me today. I'm Nana Akwe. This, of course, has been Brazier. I'm very excited to say, though. Make sure you join me tomorrow at 4 o'clock, where I shall be live doing my show from 4 till 6, Friday, Saturday and Sunday. Join me. Thank you so much to Neil Hamilton, who's been with me as well. And a big thank you to you for your company. Up next, it's Tubes & Co.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Cloudy skies and some showers in the north today, feeling cooler here, but there will still be some warm sunshine in the south. The reason being high pressure remains close by. It is edging closer to the UK over the next few days. But around the top of that high, well, we've currently got cooler conditions, cloudier weather from the Atlantic, and some showers. Those showers on the heavy side in places, particularly over the Pennines, the higher parts of Scotland as well. But through the evening, they die away. Clear skies in the south through the day, extending fairly widely at first overnight. But then another area of cloud moves in, turning things a bit more damp across western and central Scotland, Northern Ireland by the end of the night. 13 or 14 Celsius in the north, 11 to 13 Celsius overnight in the south with the clear skies. So not an oppressive night for sleeping, a bit more comfortable than, say, earlier in the week. A bright start, though, for southern areas first thing, and after any early rain across Scotland and northern England clears away, well, skies brighten here as well with a few showers developing. It looks like a sunnier day for Northern Ireland, 20 Celsius here, 24 in Cardiff, 27 in London, where it will also be sunny, but showers will keep it cooler for central and southern Scotland and northern England. And those showers continue into Friday evening before eventually it turns drier. And what's happening later Friday is high pressure is starting to build more widely across the UK. There'll still be some cloudier skies and some rain in the far northwest of Scotland, but otherwise clear skies across much of the country. And it's turning warmer, 16 Celsius as we start Saturday in London. Saturday starts off with plenty of sunshine as that high pressure re-exerts its influence across the UK. Still some rain in the far north of Scotland, but otherwise Sunday and Monday increasing amounts of sunshine